Lionel Messi, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 7, Champions League 4. Erling Haaland, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Karim Benzema, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 5. Luis Suarez, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Kylian Mbappe, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Luka Modric, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 5. Julian Alvarez, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Toni Kroos, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 5. Mohamed Salah, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Sadio Mane, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. David Beckham, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Neymar, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Andres Iniesta, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 4. Romelu Lukaku, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Angel Di Maria, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Ashraf Hakimi, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Benjamin Pavard, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Sergio Ramos, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 4. Marcelo, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 5. John Cruyff, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 3, Champions League 3. İlkay Gündoğan, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Thibaut Courtois, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Philipp Lahm, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Thomas Muller, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 2. Zinedine Zidane, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 1. Robert Lewandowski, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Gerd Müller, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 3. Kaka, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 1. Gareth Bale, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 5. Rodrigo, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Alfredo Di Stefano, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 2, Champions League 5. Eusebio, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 1. N'Golo Kante, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Cristiano Ronaldo, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 5, Champions League 5. Ronaldo, World Cup 2, Ballon d'Or 2, Champions League 0. Gerard Piqué, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 4. Mesut Ozil, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Ronaldinho, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 1, Champions League 1. Pele, World Cup 3, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Diego Maradona, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Paulo Dybala, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Paul Pogba, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Andre Pirlo, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 2. Wayne Rooney, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Dani Alves, World Cup 0, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 3. David Villa, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Thierry Henry, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 1. Manuel Neuer, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 2. Sergio Busquets, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 3. Osman Dembele, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Iker Casillas, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 3. Rafael Varane, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 4. Antonio Griezmann, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Emiliano Martinez, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 0. Xavi, World Cup 1, Ballon d'Or 0, Champions League 4.
We hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe to our channel.